theatre now. Curious Directive. Good name, intriguing name. A theatre company, which is intriguing too. Since 2008, they've been exploring life through the lens of science, creating immersive experiences and productions. Their play Pioneer was one of last year's Edinburgh Fringe highlights. It won a Fringe first, and it is back in the capital this week for the city's International Science Festival. Inspired by the real-life Mars One mission, aiming to put a human colony on Mars by 2025, and the play is looking at what we might have to gain by shooting for the stars. We're about to hear from Pioneer director and also artistic director of the company, Jack Lowe, but first, let's get into the mood with a bit of a soundscape.
Expected parachute deploy in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. We're awaiting confirmation that the parachute has deployed. Mark 1, can you confirm that the parachute has deployed?
Guys, we have a problem here. We're trying to deploy the parachute. It doesn't seem to be responding. Trying to rectify this manually.
Mark 1, we're detecting a power loss in the emergency retro thruster.
Getting pretty close to
Mark 1, can you
override.
confirm the parachute has deployed?
The parachute's not responding. Oh god, this is it. We can see Mars. We can see the ground.
No signal at the moment. Still no signal. We don't see a signal at the moment.
That is utterly chilling. And that's without the visuals there. Just a flavour of Pioneer. The man responsible, Jack Lowe, is here. Hi there, Jack. Goodness, it works well on radio, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of lovely that it's that's a transmission over the radio, 56 million miles away, and it's sort of beautifully, it comes across nicely, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does for me too. I'm sitting here on my own in a darkened studio. I'm really feeling it, mate. Quite something. And fun enough, we had a retired NASA astronaut on the show just the other week, Ron Garn. We're talking about this whole idea of the obsession with going to Mars. We're going, how about just the moon? Can we not go back to the moon? He's going, yes. I think we should be thinking of the moon and forgetting about Mars. Are you one of those people, though? I mean, the idea of the company being obviously theatre, but interested in science too. Are you constantly just kind of keeping up to date with new developments and looking for the possibilities of stories relating to these new advances?
Yeah, I think that's one of the major things that theatre can do now is to look into the future and link up the amazing things happening in science, technology, engineering, and medicine, and try to find the stories that mean something now, but also, I guess, reach into the future, like Pioneer. And your astronaut who came on it's right. There was this really strange thing when Kennedy announced that they would go to the moon and the great space race, and sort of since then, the thirst to go into other planets and different rock formations has sort of dropped away. And sadly, it's just to do with the turnover, lots of things, but it's to do with the turnover of presidents in America and all sorts of stuff like that.
And it's a strange thing with humanity. We get awfully blasé quite quickly, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
On the moon, whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, there's a scene in Pioneer where they're in the flight director's in a nightclub. She's letting her hair down in a nightclub, and they're in a high-rise nightclub, and she sort of stops herself, having risen all the way to flight director of this mission to Mars, and goes, when you stop and think about it, it's completely mind-boggling. The ability to actually go there it's kind of amazing, really. Yeah.
So tell us more about the premise of Pioneer then.
So, so the soundscape that you heard there is from the Mars One mission in 2025, which in our play has been a mission interruption. Basically, it's gone missing, the shuttle on descent into Mars atmosphere. And our play is set in 2029, and there are 3 interwoven storylines. One is in mission control in India, where you follow the story of a flight director and a mission operations director. So it's sort of like West Wing type dialogue where they're walking through corridors. And then there's the second storyline is 2 Russian brothers who take a road trip across Siberia in a banged up old Lada Sputnik 1.3. And they're the sort of everyman story. And then the final one is a Dutch astronaut and her partner who are on Mars itself. And that's the sort of very, I guess, the high-end sci-fi part of the play.
Yeah.
And they all interweave, and the stories talk to each other to some extent during the play, and they gradually, sort of like all great thrillers, gradually it's revealed what's really going on.
It's interesting talking
yeah.
to you, having just spoken to our author who, spent time in Dartmoor 20 years ago, and just the whole atmosphere stayed with her, and she'd drawn on that, but they'd gone into a totally fictional area for her book. And here are you dealing with something which is a reality, but at the heart of theatre or anything else, you've got to tell a really excellent story, and obviously part of that is characters. So is that an interesting challenge for you guys, kind of like mixing fact, speculation, just with really good, compelling figures, central characters?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing with our work, and particularly this one that sets something in the future, is that you can kind of frame how you want things to be. So how you hope things would be. So for example, the fact that our flight director is a female is very unusual in space science, but it's just not a big deal in our play. She just is. And the fact that the brothers are Russian, but on the world scale, they're not perceived as, I guess, and nowadays politically, the Russians aren't seen in particularly good light, but we shine these two Russian characters in interesting ways, showing that there's depth to being proud and Russian. It's not just about military power. It's about how Fyodorov and Tsiolkovsky and all those amazing people came up with these amazing ideas before the great. Well, I don't get into politics.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the Dutch astronauts, I mean, she's on Mars itself, and again, that's a really strong female character. When often sci-fi doesn't do that.
Indeed. But again, it's interesting because in reality, we know, especially with something like the International Space Station, that they're all about making those links and to heck with politics.
Yeah, well, it's where the kind of the idea of the sort of the cosmic space, where everything is just so kind of it's like the philosophy of it is slightly more open, and it's much more an internationalist approach, as you say.
And it's because obviously those guys, they've got the ultimate perspective. It's kind of like they can see this extraordinary blue planet. It's like, for goodness sake, can we all just work together?
I've got a brick wall outside my window.
No, totally. How seriously then do you and the company take the research? Obviously, you're springing off into fiction, but how seriously do you take the science fact?
Well, it's generally perceived in the scientific community that Mars One perhaps won't succeed, and that was an interesting starting point for us, and potentially could have been a negative starting point. But we treated it as a positive one, and we worked with astrobiologist Dr. Lewis Dartnell, and it's one of his roles is actually to reach out to the public, and the fact that our thing is to make scientific work in the theatre, so it's less sort of public engagement in a traditional sense, our work. So he was excited by us because we were bringing kind of innovative theatre making processes into his science, and so he was really interested in story. He was the one that there's a thing that I often tell people, we just sat down in a pub and put some sugar sachets and started talking about characters like that. And he said, well, something's got to go wrong. It shouldn't be on, in the world of your play. Perhaps it's really obvious if they set off and something goes wrong once they're on their way. And so we kind of gathered our story a little bit like that.
And do films I'm thinking, sorry, I'm just thinking about what you were saying earlier on about few female astronauts, but Sandra Bullock in Gravity, and something a wee bit different like Interstellar, which was going into different dimensions, literally and metaphorically. But do those all help actually, just in terms of the public's perception? Because there might be people who don't read a lot of science fiction, but they will go to see those films, and again, that might make them more receptive to what you're doing too in theatre.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? As we move forward with theatre, there's a lot of filmic references with, as you say, those films, but also 2001: Space Odyssey,
which still stands the test of time, doesn't it?
Of course, and it's because it's such a kind of brilliant. It's a brilliant situational thriller. And we've in our play there's an AI robot called Jun. developed by the Japanese in the world of our play. And Jun is a mixture of many AI systems, and we've taken influences from brilliant films like Moon by Sam
Oh, I
Rockwell.
loved that film.
It's so good, and it was made on such a small budget, and it's so good because it's so interested in its central character.
Yeah.
And the thriller aspect of it is so good because the twist is revealed so early and it kind of unravels itself. So I guess we're kind of, as a theatre company, we looked at all those science fiction films, all the great science fiction novels, and went, well, what would feel right in a theatre? Because we're sat there, and you're sat there, I'm sat here, and we're in this together. So how can we make it work?
Oh, it sounds tremendous. Well, look, we'll encourage people to get along to this, but what's the next project? Are you doing something completely different?
Yeah, we are. We're actually working with a 3D animator from Glasgow.
Uh-huh.
A guy called Craig Kirk, who won a competition that we set up to try and find a very new creative for our company. And yeah, I can't give too much away, but it's a very controversial area of science, and it will be maybe the end of this year, maybe next year, maybe we'll even come up to Edinburgh during festival time as well. But we love the festival, but it is very nice to be back at the Traverse outside of festival time. It's very special theatre.
Lovely space. Well, look, thank you very, very much for coming on and talking so brilliantly about it on the tranny, Jack. Thanks.
Not
Cheers.
at all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Jack Lowe there from Curious Directive, that when I see it written down I just want to call it Curious Detective. Curious Directive, and the show is called Pioneer, on at Edinburgh's Traverse Theatre from this Thursday until Saturday 7:30, part of the Edinburgh International Science Festival. More sciencey, arty stuff coming up shortly.